Hello, welcome to another video. This is Wisdom Hunter, and these are a series of videos for solo gaming for D&D RPG on Roll20. So when you need to just have a game by yourself on Roll20 on the internet, I'll show you some tricks and things that you can do to kind of make that game a little more fun, a little more easy for you. Today's topic is journey tracking. Now let me explain what journey tracking is that during the day, there's certain things that you want to remind yourself of so that you do them, so you don't forget to do them. So these are simple macros that I'm going to show you. You click on the macro and it'll remind you to do things, to check on things, to make sure you do things. But these little journey tracking macros really help. And I've got 4 of them. One is going to be at the end of a long rest. And one you see here on the screen is for during a short rest, the actions that you can take just to kind of remind you. And the other 2 is like after 8 hours, you can do some checks. Every 8 hours, there's some checks to do. And there's also some checks to do during the day or during the night. Certain things you want to look for to maybe bring those into play. So let me go ahead and start showing you what these journey tracking macros are. Okay, so here we are. There you can see the macros. And you'll see that they're basically just things that remind you to do things. You'll see like, do you need to check for exhaustion? Yes or no? Do you need to set a new JDC, a new journey DC? Yes or no? Do you need to change the weather? Yes or no? Other things are, do you need to review your poisons and disease and exhaustion levels? Do you need to change those somehow? Yes or no? It's just things to remind you. Are you having any dreams tonight? Yes or no? So these are just things to remind you. It's just everything is there to remind you. And so if you finish a long rest, you do the T long rest. T is for tracking the long rest. So that's the name of it. T-long rest is for tracking your long rest. So I'm just going to show you now what the macros look like when they're in Roll20. All right, so here we are in Roll20, and I'm going to start showing you these macros, how they're used. So the first one we're going to be looking at is short rest. You want to take a short rest, and you want to make sure you're doing some things. So you just come down here. You see down below I have the buttons along the bottom, short rest. So are you taking your healing actions? Are you using reserve hit points or hit die? Whatever you need to do to recuperate some of your hit points. Are you changing your travel roles? Is one person the guide? They want to change to being a different part of the group. Well, I use travel roles, like one of the characters will be the guide. The other character will be the scout. Another character will be the hunter, foraging for food and things like that. See if they want to change those roles any. And another one is utility and planning. A utility is like, do you need to fix anything? Do you need to switch any of your equipment? Do you need to check on any of your magic items? Do you need to activate anything? Is there any equipment you need to work with? And planning is, what do you want to go? Do you want to talk this through? Do you need a little bit of time to just think about what you're going to be doing for in the next part of the journey? So utility or planning, right? So there's just little questions to ask you if you need to do any of these little things. Let's go on to the next one. So these are like morning rolls after a long rest. First, you want to reduce your non-poison and disease exhaustion by 2 levels. So if you have some levels of exhaustion, reduce them by 2 because you've just taken a long rest. Exhaustion caused by poison and disease is not reduced. So it's only the exhaustion that's produced by adventuring and traveling and other things that you have to endure through. And then you go into your disease and poison. Do you need to do any saves after a long rest? Like sometimes for certain diseases and poisons, after you wake up, you need to do a save. How much of that were you able to heal during the long rest? And then you go into your disease and poison damage. How much of that disease and poison is causing damage to you after a long rest if you're not able to cure it totally after that long rest? And then hit points, spell points, and luck. So that's a morning roll that you would basically do. So are you checking on your hit points? Are you recuperating your hit points? Are you recuperating your spell points and your luck points? And then you come to your exhaustion check. Every morning you still have to do an exhaustion check. Even though you've cured 2 levels of exhaustion during the night, you might still have some exhaustion remaining. So you'd have to do an endurance check to see if you're going to have any exhaustion remaining after a long rest. And then a new JDC. This is something I do every morning, is that does the JDC, that journey DC, which sets that level of difficulty for a particular portion of the journey, does that need to change? So yes or no. Does the weather need to change? So maybe you wake up and that morning the weather needs to change. So you start doing your weather rolls. I have another video on how to change the weather, how to set the weather. And then you want to look at your travel rolls for this new day. And the travel rolls for me is like one's a guide, one's a scout, one's a hunter, If you're changing the environment you're going through, maybe you want to change those roles. Maybe you're going into a city and you want one of the party members to be the guide through the city. And then maybe if you're going into the forest and you change, you want another character in the party to be the guide through the forest. So do you want to change those roles as you go forward? So those are the roles after a long rest. Okay, let's go on to the next tracking role, day and night. So let's look at this is going to look like. So these are things that during the day you want to check on, or during the night. Are you going to have a random encounter? Yes or no? Well, if you're going to have a random encounter, set that up. I have another video on random encounters and how to do random encounters. Do you have to do any foraging? You can do that 3 times per day. So then you go on to poison and disease damage, if every hour. So if you have poison and disease damage that you're doing, you want to check on that. Now's the time to do that. And then you want to review your poison, disease, and exhaustion at this point in time. Have you been doing something strenuous? Do you need to do an exhaustion check? Maybe you're coming down with some exhaustion. So let's check on that. So during the day or during the night, you want to be checking on these things. And then dreams. This is mainly a night thing. Are you going to be having any dreams that night? Do you need any information coming in? Well, if so, let's work up a dream, see what kind of information comes. And then corruption. Corruption is something if you're going through an evil area with a lot of shadow, and you're sleeping in that area or traveling through that area, there's certain vibrations and essences that can corrupt you just because you're in the presence of that area. So you have to do a corruption check, and maybe you're going to get a certain level of corruption that's going to start trying to corrupt who you are as a character. And as corruption builds up, your personality will change, some of your bonuses will change, things about you change. I'll do another video on corruption. And then exhaustion check. During the day, during the night, you want to be checking on your exhaustion. Let's go on to the next one, which is at the end of every 8 hours. See what it looks like? So at the end of every 8 hours, let's say you've been traveling for 8 hours. Do you need to set camp? All right. If you need to set camp, what are you going to do? Do you need food and water? Have you been eating? How much food and water have you been using? Do you have food and water? How much do you need? Did you do any foraging? Check on how much you have. And then check on your disease and poison saves. Yes or no? Do you have a disease? Do you have any poisons? Is this the time to be checking on it? Depending on those saves, do you take any damage from the disease or poison? Yes or no? Once again, you want to be checking on your exhaustion. Are you beating these endurance checks because of the adventuring level? Is the weather tough? Are you having to climb over mountains? All these types of things feed into exhaustion. And then weather. Is the weather changing now? Do you need to reestablish a new weather pattern? And then watches. Who's going to be taking watches during the night? So the day is kind of broken up into 8-hour blocks. There's the long rest, and then there's traveling during the day, and then there's at night when you're setting up camp, you're sitting around getting ready to sleep, you're starting to rest, you're taking care of some equipment, maybe doing some foraging. So there's 8-hour blocks, and these tracking macros help me keep track of what's happening throughout the day in different things. So just to summarize, these tracking macros help me determine what's happening after a long rest, what's happening after a day of traveling, what's happening during the day of traveling, and what's happening during the night of resting, and also some ideas on what to do during a short rest. Okay, so that's basically it. These macros are basically there just to help you keep track of the story by asking you, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you checking on this? Are you checking on this? Basically, that's the idea. So they're very helpful to keep the story on track. All right, I think that's enough. This is Wisdom Hunter signing out. And remember, whoever has the most fun wins.